everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. And it is a wonderful afternoon here in the incredibly humid South, where there is condensation on my windows because it's just that humid outside. But I hope that the world is treating you all well, and that you're not affected by one of the various inclement weather situations that we're dealing with in America at the moment. I know that we have some friends in the Southwest that are probably not particularly excited about the fact that it's so hot out that way. So I shouldn't really complain about the heat here. And of course, we've got friends in the Northeast that have so much moisture up there that it's literally flooding. So probably shouldn't communicate too much about the humidity here. But we've got both of them at the same time, and it stinks. No, you don't live in hell. Well, DCI Banks, I'm glad that you don't. I've heard that it's pretty hot down there, but that heaven is room temperature. So do what you need to do to get your situation straightened up, right? What's up, Kilted Preacher, DCI, and Lumpy? How's it going? Hope you all are doing well. It's been an okay day. I got stream planned, and I did some planning stuff and some just looking around at things and scouting stuff out. I'm still in the process of tweaking a little bit of academic stuff here and there for Tolkien lecture things that are probably going to come up pretty soon. I'm thinking about actually typing them out and then delivering them in read format, because that's how Tolkien always gave his lectures. So I don't know. I've never actually done that before. Usually when I lecture on something, I just have sort of bullet point list, and then I do all of the ad lib stuff off the cuff. But we'll see. I don't know. That definitely won't be happening this week. And probably won't be happening next week, because next week has a lot of stuff in it. I've got to move some books, and I've got to do some stuff around the house, and I need to really plan out some home improvement stuff. I need to talk to KP and Mac in the Lab Coat about availability for a project that I need help with. There's a lot of stuff going on, but it's all handleable and manageable stuff, so it's not like anybody needs to worry. I got to put some stuff in the mail, hopefully try to sell some stuff to make some additional fundage and clear up some space on the shelf, because, you know, it is what it is. Little Donnie Fund, welcome in. Hello. How are you doing? Hope you're doing well. This is Adventures in History. And we talk about historical stuff, and we talk about history, and we make fun out of history, and sometimes we just make fun of history, but that's okay, because human beings are goofy, and we do stupid stuff sometimes, and we kind of talk about that a little bit here whenever it works. But tonight we are looking specifically at what you might call Eastern Europe. We're going to be looking at a lot of the countries that are falling or rising or doing well or not doing so well. There is going to be a lot of focus on Byzantium tonight, which is the sort of center of gravity when it comes to a lot of the Eastern European politics at the time. And we'll start laying the groundwork from some stuff that will be very, very prevalent next time we come around to the European system in the next phase. What's up, Green Herring? How are you doing? It's exciting that you're getting to go to Ireland. That's one of my top places that I'd really, really like to go. It's my ancestral homeland, right? And I'd love to go hang out and see what's going on over there. But of course, I think everybody knows that I would just like to go. Like, would you like to go to that place? Probably yes. I'm not overly picky when it comes to travel, as long as I'm not going to get, murdered or thrown into a jail that I'm never going to get out of. There's a pretty good chance I'd like to go there. So it's a bit of a last minute thrown together trip. Probably wouldn't get a lot of the things you would. Well, that's okay though. That's okay. The goal isn't to go to Ireland and have the trip that Shane would plan. It's to go to Ireland and enjoy the trip that you have. I actually, for a little while, considered doing planning for people's vacations, and I really liked the idea of it. But as soon as I thought about that seriously and was starting to kind of gear up to think about it, COVID hit and nobody went on vacation. So I never really picked that back up after. But I always tell my friends and people that I know, like, if you're going to go somewhere and you want some help trying to plan some things, I like that kind of stuff. I like even the thought of how to game out what to do and what time and how to get around. That's interesting to me because it's like a big puzzle. So, I don't know. If you're ever going on a trip and you need some help with anything, hit me up. I might not have ever been there, but I could probably give you some cool things to go see that I would want to go see. And some people are like, heck, I don't want to go on a trip like McKinnis trip. Yeah, it's just all crazy and like 14 sites in a day kind of thing. And you wake up and you do, 19-hour days. Not an archaeology trip, a vacation. I can do those two. I'm in the process of preliminary stuff for what could be hypothetical, not actually nailed down yet, a trip to Scotland next year. Potentially, but that's all in the air and everything is fuzzy right now. So I don't know if that's going to actually happen or not. But let's get down to the business at hand. And we will, first, of course, we can look at the map here and we see several big important concepts or regions that we need to point out. Of course, we have the Black Sea, which is this lovely body of water here. We have the Aegean, which is part of the larger Mediterranean. We'll be talking a lot about this region right here, which is modern-day Turkey. In the ancient world, we refer to it as Anatolia. And then we have our lovely Balkan Peninsula, which is home to so many different peoples, and that will be a big part of tonight's discussion. And we'll be generally talking about what's going on over here in this part of Eastern Europe. And I'm being petitioned by a puppy. What would you like, puppy? You want to come and see me? Come here. Come on. Oh, hello. Look, it's a puppy. It's a puppy. Hello, puppy. What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, that's a good girl. Oh, my goodness. It's such a good puppy. Hello. Are you upset because I'm talking to the light box and I'm not looking at the puppy? Who would ignore a puppy like that? Who would do such a thing? Such a mean old human. Oh, I've got to change your rabies tag. I need to do that tonight, don't I? Yes. Yes, I need to change your rabies tag. Oh, you're going to get vocal? What? What is it? Do you need to go outside? What do you want to do? Whoa. Oh no, she's already had dinner. She's just a giant mess. What's up, Matt? I see you in there. How's it going? Hope you're doing well. Okay, so there's our geographic breakdown for the night, and we can go over here and look a little bit more in detail about the lay of the land when it comes to our political sphere. Now, we're going to talk about a lot of these people again, and I'll refer back to the map multiple times. But again, the most powerful country that we have militarily is the Byzantine Empire, at least on paper at the beginning. Byzantines have quite a bit of land here, of course, capital here at Constantinople. We'll talk quite a bit about the Bulgarians tonight. We'll talk about Croatia. We'll talk about Hungary. We'll talk about Moravia. This, by the way, a map at the year 900. We'll talk a little bit about Poland. We'll refer to the Kievan Rus multiple times. Of course, this is the pun for the night. And we'll talk also about the Khaganate of the Khazars. So all of these people are going to be sort of involved in the larger scheme of things. And we will start here with the Byzantine Empire. And things weren't going so great in the Byzantine Empire in the early 900s. It's actually going quite bad, if we're just being honest. And it had not been good for about a decade. Even the 890s had a lot of negative, detractor events from the Byzantine Empire. The Bulgars were sort of gaining power. And in 896, there is a really big battle where the Bulgars are going to defeat the Byzantines, and the Byzantines are going to have to start paying them a yearly tribute to keep the Bulgars from invading. Now, that, of course, is going to be massively humiliating, and you don't want to do that if you're the Byzantine Empire and these Bulgars are upstarts. But that's what happens. Now, on the other side of the Byzantine Empire, we have the Abbasid Caliphate, who is still particularly aggressive towards the Byzantines. And in 904, the second largest city of the Byzantine Empire, a place called Thessalonica, gets sacked by the invading Abbasid navy. Now, Thessalonica sits over here in Greece, and the reason that this was such an easy thing to do for the Abbasids, the Byzantines theoretically controlled all of the territory around the Aegean. You might go, why was this such an easy thing to attack? Well, the Byzantines had lost the island of Crete. And there was a emirate set up here that was answerable to the Abbasids, and they were launching naval raids into the Aegean, which is not good for the Byzantines at all. Sacking Thessalonica is not just losing men and citizens and money and relics and stuff like that from your second largest city. This is also a psychological blow where things are already pretty bad, and here comes another one where it's just even worse. Not too long after that, in 907, the Kievan Rus show up in the Mediterranean, and the Byzantines have to try to basically pay them off. They conduct some negotiations and convince the Rus that it's time for them to go back home. But it's fair to point out here that the Kievan Rus are going to become much more frequently involved in Byzantine politics from this point forward. Because, hey, if we can go down and scare these people and threaten them, and then they give us money and ask us nicely to go away, we could do that again next year, and they would have to give us more money, right? And this is, of course, going to cause quite a bit of trouble, because if you're the Byzantines, you don't want to have to keep paying these people. And they're scary, and they're physically large. And at this point, the Slavic people were very much considered to be barbarians. So you don't really like making treaties with these people in the first place. Now, there's an attempt in 911 to take back Crete that fails utterly. And when things get really, really bad is in 917, when the Bulgarians are going to invade under the rule of a guy named Simeon I. So Simeon I is going to be a very powerful king of the Bulgars. He is going to stretch out this campaign for about 6 years, all the way until 923. Some want to say 924. The Byzantines are going to lose Adrianople, which was a very large city over in the world of Greece, on this side of Greece. The Bulgarians are over here, and they're already spreading out over this way. This is just, it's not good for the Byzantines, right? They're also going to, the Bulgars are, under Simeon, going to lay siege to Constantinople. Now, this is a really dangerous position to be in, because the Bulgarians are basically going to block off all of the land routes that are going through the territory of the Byzantines to resupply Constantinople. Now, of course, it's on a peninsula, so it's going to be able to get supplies by sea, but we also have the threat of pirate ships and raiders from the Abbasids in the Aegean, so it's not necessarily super peaceful to even rely on that. And what ends up happening is a bit of a moment where the Byzantines are going to have to kind of bend the knee, which is really, really odd because this is not something they had to do quite a bit. It's a very rare occurrence here. What ends up happening is that Simeon is going to extract certain promises and certain titles and things from them. For example, Simeon is going to demand that the Byzantine emperor also recognize Simeon as the Bulgarian emperor. Now, that would theoretically put them on the same level, but that's not the way that the Byzantines had previously wanted to look at this problem with the Bulgarians, right? They always thought, we're the Byzantines and we're Rome and we're going to beat them up and it'll be easy and we'll just, go and they'll just kind of fall in line. But they're on the receiving end of it this time, and it's not so easy being on the receiving end of it. Now, another thing that happens is that the Bulgarians are going to demand that the Byzantine emperor marry Simeon's daughter. And what this would do then, of course, is make Simeon's grandkid the heir to both the Bulgarian throne and the Byzantine throne. So we're playing a little bit of long game here, where my person, that's my grandkid, could theoretically rule both of these kingdoms, and there could be a merging of the kingdoms. This is a sort of a dark time for the Byzantines. This early 900s period of time is pretty scary. Now, with all of this stuff being bought off, Simeon is in a really, really powerful position. And if we actually look at how much territory he had taken, Bulgaria controlled a sizable portion of the entire Balkan Peninsula, all the way over to the, this would be the heel of the boot of Italy, right? So we're all the way over here with the Tyrrhenian, all the way across to the Black Sea. Now, they do agree to abandon this region right here, which is Thrace, and give that back, but, it's bad. They've expanded way over here. Again, they've lost Adrianople. It's just nasty for the Byzantines. But Simeon agrees to sign a peace treaty, and luckily, and seriously here, luckily, for the Byzantines, the Bulgarians are going to kind of go away for a little while and look a little bit more northward. Do need to correct myself. I located Adrianople over here. Adrianople's over here. I don't know why I said it was over here. So ignore my previous statement of the location for Adrianople. It was a big city, though. It is very important. I just don't know what my brain was thinking. I could make excuses, but nobody would really listen to them anyway, right? So what do you do if you're the Byzantines at this point? Well, you got to kind of hope for the best. And they sort of just lie low for a while. And they try not to stir up too much trouble. And they try to just lick their wounds and reconstitute their military and reorganize stuff. And then out of the blue, the Rus are going to decide to show back up in 941 and try to full out invade. Now, this is not going to be a very easy fight for the Byzantines to push off, but they do manage to successfully defeat the Rus invasion. There's a guy, one of their famous generals, that's named John Kourkouas. And he was kind of a boss, and he's going to win several big battles against, of course, the Rus, but also over here in Mesopotamia, because the Byzantines had lost a sizable portion of territory over here to the Abbasids and various other groups, and Kourkouas is going to manage to get some of this territory back, which is really, really good, because anytime you add territory, you're also adding money, and the Byzantines were broke. I mean, they weren't like, skint broke. They were in a situation where more money would have been way better than just equal to the dollars and amount of gold that they would have got, right? I don't even know what I'm trying to say here, right? They're also going to catch a break because the Abbasids are going to start falling apart. And we have discussed the Abbasid collapse in a stream a couple of weeks ago, so I don't have to go all the way back over that. But when the Abbasids start losing territory, our guy John is going to be there with the Byzantine army to take some of it back. Now, what's really interesting about this is that there seems to be some debate between some of the generals and maybe even the emperors at the time about how quickly the Byzantines should expand. And John is of the idea that when you take a place, you should pacify it first. You should sort of be slow. You don't want to take a whole ton of land and then figure out that you've bitten off more than you can chew. And this tactic is actually quite intelligent. And in a position that the Byzantines were in, they didn't really need to overextend themselves, because even taking one really big city might be the potential overextension. If that city then decides to riot, this ties down all of your military. You run into problems with raiders in the area because you're pulling troops off of the roads and you can't protect your trade anymore. So John expands and he wins a series of battles. And if you just look at it on paper, it's like he wins this in 941 and this in 942 and this in 943. But he's not lopping off these giant chunks of territory. He's moving very wisely and very intelligently and very incrementally. And he gets remembered very, very well in the Byzantine histories. He gets called a lot of good names, right? Like, this guy really, really knew what he was up to. Unfortunately, we don't have any images of him. I couldn't show you what he looked like. There's not a statue of or anything like that of him that I know of. There could be something out there, but I just couldn't find anything when I was looking for pictures of him. But the Byzantines are kind of getting themselves a little bit back together. Now, when things are going to really take off is under our next emperor, who's a guy named Nicephorus II. And I get to put on the adventure hat. For those of you that might be new here, this is the adventure hat. And because I am way too pale, I have to wear a hat everywhere that I go when I'm out in the field. And when I see things that I have, or I get to show things that I have seen, I get to wear the adventure hat. So we're going to get to look at Nicephorus. And this particular image is a photo that I took when I was in Istanbul last year. This is part of a really, really big numismatic display at the Archaeological History Museum in Constantinople. I keep calling it Constantinople because in my head that's sort of what it still is, but it's Istanbul now. Apologies. And there are a whole bunch of emperor's coins. So here is Emperor Nicephorus. You can see that he rules from 963 to 969, which is not necessarily the longest of reigns, but it is a very eventful and a very important one, because Nicephorus is going to begin the Byzantine recovery period. And this is going to be something that is not necessarily miraculous, but it is a little bit kind of unexpected. There are a lot of things outside of the Byzantines' control that really, really break positively for them. The collapse of the Abbasid power, the splintering and the fractionation of the former Abbasid world, the invasion of a lot of peoples like the Turks into the Abbasid realm, Armenia becoming an independent Christian kingdom, the collapse of the Khazar Khaganate, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, and a lot of other things that are going on in Europe that we'll talk about in just a bit, all really break the Byzantines' way. And Nicephorus is going to be sort of the spearhead that really starts poking back the boundaries. He is going to begin his focus over in the west, and early on in his career, he is not necessarily very successful with his adventures over here in the western part. Istanbul was once Constantinople, and if you want to know why, I guess you'll just have to ask the Turks. Anyway, one of the things that's going on over here was, again, for a long time, there was this peace between the Bulgars and the Byzantines. But around this time period, and especially starting in the late 950s and going into the 960s, there had been some incursions by the Hungarians, or as they were called at the time, the Magyars. Now, this was technically something that broke part of the treaty, because the Bulgars had agreed that one of the things that they would do is keep the Magyars out of the Byzantine territory. Now, that's a tough thing to promise, right? We keep this entire group of people who are particularly good at raiding out of all of your territory. So a raid here and a raid there is a little bit to be expected. But the raids were getting pretty frequent and big, and hard to claim that the Bulgars didn't know that this was happening. And Nicephorus sort of senses that the Bulgarians are actually just letting the Magyars through, right? Maybe the Bulgars are just trying to soften up the Byzantines again by not stopping these invasions. So Nicephorus gets this really interesting idea. First off, he tries to go and fight the Magyars, and there are some benefits to pushing them back, but really they're going to be doing a lot of raid and force tactics, a lot of hit and run stuff. They're never really going to allow themselves to be pinned down to fight a big set piece battle where the majority of their army could be destroyed. So Nicephorus isn't really successful completely at keeping them out. So what he decides to do is poke a little bit at the Bulgars. Now, how do you do that while still being a treaty partner to the Bulgarians? You can't go invade Bulgaria. That would obviously break all of the terms of the treaty. But if the Bulgarians are going to let the Magyars through, this opens up an interesting concept of maybe there are people that don't like the Bulgars, that we could get to attack the Bulgars. And it just so happens that there are people that would love to attack the Bulgars, and they're called the Kievan Rus. And it seems that Nicephorus decided that he was going to bribe the Rus into attacking Bulgaria. Now, he didn't attack Bulgaria, and he covers it up enough that it looks like there's some plausible deniability. And to be completely fair, we're not 100% sure historically that this actually was a bribe. It could have just been, hey, if you want to attack Bulgaria, we won't stop you. That could have been enough. But regardless of what actually happened, the Bulgarians are going to have their hands full with the Rus. And that's going to tie up any sort of potential army that might have been preparing to come over into a weakened Byzantium, right? So it's not a completely successful tactic over in the west. Where Nicephorus is really going to shine is over here in the east. And he is going to be very, very successful. He is going to take the city of Aleppo. He's going to retake the island of Cyprus. He's going to retake the island of Crete. And he's going to start pushing kind of out on this border here. And he's going to end up taking back the city of Antioch, which is a really big city right about here. And if you know anything about Christianity, or if you were around on previous streams, you'll know that Antioch was one of the patriarch cities. So this was a city that was of extreme importance to the Christian faith. And that's a big deal when he takes Antioch back. He gets a lot of praise for bringing Antioch back into the fold of Christianity. So Nicephorus is going to be in the same sort of vein as our former general John Koukouros, and he's going to be methodical and direct and make sure that he's holding territory, and he makes sure that when it's time for him to pass the throne, that the Byzantines are in good shape. And they are. They're in quite good shape. Now, of course, he does end up dying. That's what happens to everybody. And our next emperor is a guy named John the First Zimisces. And I get to put the adventure hat back on because I've got a coin of his too. I've actually got a whole bunch of them, but there's only one of them with a decent picture of this guy. All right, so here we go. This is John the First, and we see him over here being crowned by our patriarch of Constantinople, who of course is going to be the head of the church in that area. So, look, I'm a good Christian. Look, I am your emperor. Everybody should love me. I've got a nice big full beard. And a very straight but odd mustache. Anyway, this is John. You can see that he rules from 969 to 976. And does so pretty successfully. He is going to be very, very good when it comes to battlefield tactics and leading, and he is going to capitalize on the momentum built by Nicephorus, and he's going to get to do quite a bit of stuff that is it's almost unthought of. He starts to retake this area, the Holy Land, the Levantine region. He has several big campaigns in Syria. He is going to retake Damascus. He's going to push into the region of Lebanon, and he's going to take Beirut and Acre, and he's going to get all the way down here to Caesarea, which is not too terribly far away from Jerusalem. It had been a long time since anybody in the Byzantine world even thought that they might be close to a position to retaking Jerusalem. Jerusalem had fallen to Muslim hands very, very rapidly during the initial expansion of Islam out of Saudi Arabia, and it had been centuries since the Byzantines had been within striking distance with an army. And there was a lot of hope that John was going to be able to pull off some sort of miracle and bring Jerusalem back into the Christian fold. Now, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. But he was also successful over here in the western part of the Byzantine Empire, because he decides that it's time for the peace with the Bulgarians to end. And he's going to invade and fight several very large battles against the Bulgarians. And he's going to defeat the Bulgarians very, very soundly. And specifically here, he does something symbolically important. So is he the inspiration for the mythical King John? So you're talking about King John like from Robin Hood? Like evil King John? No. If that's who you're referring to, that's John of England. That would have been about 200 years-ish after what we're talking about right now. That would have been during the Third Crusade. So the king of England at that time was Richard, Richard the Lionheart, who went on crusade with several other very important figures. No, the king that they thought was ruling faraway Christian kingdom in Africa. No, I think that is going to likely go back to the Aksumite Empire that we talked about a little bit last week. They were down here in what is referred to as the Horn of Africa. There were Christian kings down this way in a couple of different kingdoms. The Aksumite Empire is the predecessor of modern day Ethiopia, but there's also Makuria, which was up this way. Basically all of the groups that we talked about last week that were Christians. So that is likely going to come from one of these Christian kingdoms down here in Africa, especially the Aksumite Empire that had been Christian since the middle part of the 300s, that had a lot of contact with the regular Byzantine world until the Muslim expansion. Of course, that would sever the tie between Egypt using the Nile to get down to these countries and put a sort of a shield of Islamic forces between Christian forces. Yeah. So that's almost certainly going to be one of these Ethiopians, quite likely. I don't know if there might be enough information on Prester John to have a viewer request stream. I don't know. My gut tells me it would be an interesting attempt, but I don't think there's quite a bit enough there to really go. Also, Prester John is okay. So we can tangent for a little bit here. Part of the thing that starts happening, and how about this? I'll take some of the stuff that we were going to talk about it, and we'll just go ahead and talk about it right here. One of the things that's happening during this century, the 900 to 1000 century, is that a lot of these kingdoms in Europe are starting to realize that they're not quite as cool as they think they are. And by the time we get to when like the real Prester John myths start kicking up, that's a little bit later, a couple hundred years later, like the 1300s is when those start getting really, really popular. That's because of a lot of these European kingdoms that had sent people over to Asia in the Crusades. And when they got over from Western Europe and even Central Europe to Asia, they figured out, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff that we don't have over here. Now, this is a predecessor of the Renaissance, right? Where scholars are going to hear about all of these things that they have over in the East and start sucking knowledge out of the Byzantine Empire, translating Arabic sources that had preserved, Greco-Roman texts from thousands of years before. But in this particular time period, there is a awareness that's growing that the world is bigger than just the little people that are around us. And they had always sort of known that. But the emphasis behind a lot of this, like the Prester John myth. So I guess I should explain what this is. So theoretically, Prester John is this very, very fabulously wealthy African Christian king that ruled this very, very powerful Christian nation down in Africa. And the myth is going to start around the late 1200s or so, maybe early 1300s. And it's going to be very, very popular in Europe all the way through the Age of Exploration. There were some people that clearly went on exploratory trips around Africa after the 1500s when the Portuguese mapped around the end, around the end of the Africa back up to the other side of it, looking for the kingdom of Prester John, right? But the reason that existed was because of the fact that people figured out how big the world was. And they figured out that Western Europe wasn't the center of the world. And I did mention this last week, but I'll re-mention it again here. During this time period, this is the center of the world. The Indian Ocean was the economic hub of global economic activity. It had the majority of the money. It had the majority of the luxury items that were moving around. It was the place where all the biggest cities were. It was the economic hub of the world. And a lot of these countries in Europe didn't get that, because to them, they were the heirs to the greatest empire that the world had ever seen. You know, if you're in Carolingian France, right, you are the second Rome, because you're following the Holy Roman Empire. And the kingdom that you have is a direct line back to the Roman Empire, which, of course, everybody knows is just the greatest empire on earth. But at that same time, where the average Frankish king might have made $100, one of these kings over in somewhere like the Swahili coast, like at Zanzibar, might have had 3 times that much money. Just because this is where the money was, and this is where the culture was, and this is where the smarts were. The Chinese Renaissance starts 200 years before the European Renaissance, and it's better in a lot of ways. The Chinese invent movable type printing presses hundreds of years before the Europeans do. But this all comes from lack of knowledge. And the Europeans just didn't know how big the world was. And they didn't know that they weren't the center of it. Including these kingdoms over here like the Byzantines, right? They thought that they were the big dogs and they were blessed by God, and you know, that they had the heavenly ordained emperor and the faith that had been set up by, you know, God himself. But in the grand scheme of things, the Byzantines weren't even probably on the top 5 list of most powerful empires at the time, right? The Fatimids that were just across the ocean, or the Mediterranean Sea from them down here in Egypt, were just as much their equal. I don't know, man. I'm probably just rambling right now, and I don't know if I'm actually answering the question or addressing the point. But in the 10th century, people start figuring out that there's a lot of stuff going on, and they all want to be a part of it, right? Is Byzantium on the periodic table? That's a fair question, Macaroni and Brie. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Probably in the Lanthanide series, if I would guess. Lumpy, you're welcome to ask a more pointed question about any of that rambling garbage that I just did, because it was not necessarily in line. It was much more stream of consciousness as it sort of came to me out of the ether. So you're welcome to ask follow-ups to that if you wanted to. It does. It absolutely sounds like one. Sounds like something mined maybe in Anatolia, right? First discovered over here. All right, back to John Simiskis, though. We had this big war against the Bulgarians, and John is going to win, and he wins so big that he strips the title of emperor from the king of the Bulgars. So they could no longer call themselves emperor. He basically demotes the emperor of Bulgaria back to being a king, which had always been a thorn in the side of the Byzantines, going all the way back to when Simeon basically extorted it from them. They did not like having multiple emperors. They also really didn't like the fact that there was a Holy Roman Emperor going on over in the other part of Europe. But and if you recall from previous streams, or maybe you weren't here, they had actually tried to stop Charlemagne from getting the title Holy Roman Emperor, because they felt like that would diminish the role of the Byzantine Emperor, because now there are 2 emperors, and you can't have 2 Christian emperors. There's only supposed to be 1 Christian emperor, and it's supposed to be in Constantinople, because that's where God said so, right? Despite the fact that Constantinople wasn't even in the city when Jesus was alive. But, you know, who cares? It's where he lives now, right? One step further, though, John is going to take this really interesting step and claims to annex all of Bulgaria. Now, he doesn't actually get control of all of Bulgaria. That would be a very big sort of coup kind of event, but he does get a lot of it back, right? This is a big step up. Clearly, though, the previous arrangement where the Bulgarians were subservient to the Byzantines has been reestablished. And when the Rus show back up to start causing trouble, John beats them up too. So by this point, the Byzantines had hit a pretty happy point where they're back sort of in the driver's seat. And this is when we're going to get a big and very important ruler, a guy named Basil II. And I'll get to put back on the adventure hat. Dun, 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 because I'm going to show you another coin of his. All right. So here we have Basil, and this is his son, younger son, Constantine. They were co-rulers for a little while. But Basil here, this is Basileus II, or Basil II, has a lot of cool nicknames. One of them is Porphyrogenitus. He was one of the sons of Constantine VII. So Porphyrogenitus means born in the purple. And he's going to get a much cooler nickname in the early part of the 1000s. You can see that he rules for a long time, 976 to 1025, right? Almost 50 years. Yeah, born into the purple. If you'd like for me to spell that. It's like that. Yeah, so you got to remember that purple is the royal color. And this comes all the way back from like Bronze Age periods of time when purple was one of the more difficult dyes to gain. Specifically, the ancient purple dye came from this ground up shell of, what's it? It's not a bivalve. I can't remember the name of it. Some sort of like conch looking thing called murex. And you fish this out of the Mediterranean, you grind it up and it makes purple dye. But it's very, very hard to get and it's very, very expensive. So born into the purple means that he was born regal, right? Because his dad was emperor. That meant he was kid emperor. Now, clearly he didn't get the rule right away. We had Nicephorus and we had John Zemisces, but Basil is going to come around and he's a big, big dude. I don't know if Ruthius is here, but I'm guessing Ruthius is not here, given that we haven't heard him talk about Basil yet. But I know that Ruthius was just sort of chomping at the bit to get Basil on the plate here. He's a pretty important emperor, though. He really is. He takes over, and for the first time, the Byzantines are going to be in a position where they actually need to fight off some baddies that are internal. They have a civil war. There are two really big landowning generals in Anatolia that rebel, and Basil has to put those two down, and it takes a while. It takes a pretty good part of the early years of his reign to basically restore all of the peace in the territory. And at that point, I take it that he has some big expectations to live up to. Absolutely. If you're going to claim Porphyrogenitus as your nickname, you've got to stay in the purple, right? Not just be born into it. So, and he does a good job of living up to it. He's a very, very successful emperor. So the situation with the Bulgarians, they didn't like being dominated, and they had caused some trouble. But Basil was a bit worried at all of the potential problems with actually taking over Bulgaria, right? There are all of these other people that are in the region. We have Croats over here. We have the Magyars. We have the Kievan Rus. what are we looking at if we actually take all of Bulgaria? Well, there's going to be some interesting development here, and he's going to form an alliance with this guy. Now, I know that this is a fairly poor-looking coin, but the fact that this comes from Kyiv is actually going to be pretty important. And the smiling gentleman here on the coin is a guy named Vladimir the Great. Now, Vladimir had been very successful as a local smaller leader in the Kievan Rus territory, and he was going to be on, yes, a bearded fellow, indeed. He was going to be on the way up in the world, and he and his Varangians had managed to take over Kiev and had put himself into sort of the driver's seat of the Kievan Rus principality. Now, the initial discussions between Basil and Vladimir don't go so great, because Basil goes, hey, we would like for you to enter an alliance with us against the Bulgarians. And the initial response was, oh, that sounds great. Let me marry your daughter. No, I'm sorry. Let me marry your sister. And that's a big ask, right? First off, at that point, the Kievan Rus were not Christian. Also, again, the Byzantines had some rather negative opinions about Slavic people. Now, this wasn't racism like we understand it today. This was just ethnocentrism. Any non-Christian group was going to get looked down on by a Christian group. And Basil's like, no, you don't get to marry my sister. That's just, first off, no. She's a Christian. She wants to get married in a church. There's got to be the whole church thing involved. And Vladimir goes, oh, okay, so here's the deal. Look, I had been kind of shopping around for religions, and I had asked a whole bunch of people that are in my territory what kind of religions exist out there. And I talked about some Jewish people, and I talked to some Muslim people, and I talked to some Christian people. And I think we'd actually like to convert to Christianity. And Basil's like, oh, really? And so Vladimir ends up converting himself, and then encourages the rest of his kingdom to convert to Christianity. And of course, at that point, they're going to be Christianity flavored through Constantinople. So this sort of bolsters the side of the Constantinopolitan, what we would call today the Eastern Orthodox version of Christianity. And of course, at that point, it's perfectly fine for Basil's sister to marry another good Christian. And in fact, this is solidifying arrangements here. And Basil, at that point, has taken one of the biggest players and put that player in his pocket. And as a show of respect, Vladimir sends Basil a group of big strapping soldiers that are called Varangians. And this is the fabled Varangian Guard. And this gets established in 988. And from this point for about the next 250-ish years, the Byzantine Emperor's personal guard will be a contingent of these big hybrid Slavic Viking guys. And not Ferengi, not the wheelers and the dealers on Deep Space Nine. Varangian. I see a moose. Somehow I knew that was going to end up coming up, but, there we go. Rule of acquisition. Right, exactly. I am a large Viking Slavic warrior. I have a big friggin' broadsword. I take it, therefore it's mine. Right? That's how it works. That's how it goes, right? Anyway, with the situation under control in the West, Basil needs to handle a little bit of stuff going on in the east before turning his attention to other things. And for a little while, at the very tail end of our story, in the very closing years of the 900s, Basil is going to go over and fight first a group of people called the Hamanids, which were a splinter group of the Abbasids that had set themselves up right here. And then he's going to fight the Fatimids and end up basically bringing truce to this part of the Mediterranean world for the moment. Not forever, but for the moment. And that's going to leave his attention unfettered to deal with the Bulgarians. And we'll pick back up here next time we're around, because Basil gets a new new nickname, and that is Bulgarontus, which is the Bulgar Slayer, which is a pretty big spoiler for what he's about to do to Bulgaria. Hint, it ain't pretty. And that's really nasty, and it has a lot of Christian overtones and undertones, and we'll talk about all that stuff next time that we're around. Now, watch Rhetheus show up in about 2 minutes and go, "Hey, have you talked about Basil?" And, of course, we will have already talked about Basil, and then he'll get sad. Now, there are other countries out there, right? I showed you a whole bunch of different countries. Let's pick back up with a few of them and sort of check in on what's going on. So first off, let's check in with this country right here, the Kingdom of Greater Moravia. All right, now that's a pretty big city. It's got Prague, it's got Krakow, and it's got Warsaw, and this is a big Bulfi the Bulgar Slayer. Interesting. I appreciate it. Anyway, what's going on with Moravia? Well, it's not going so great in Moravia. The Moravians had taken over a territory that was fairly disparate with both settlements and ethnic groups and identities. And they had held it together for a little while, but the nobility is going to start being a really big problem for the king of the Moravians. And you have some of the nobles who are going to be pro-Eastern Orthodox, and you have some of the nobles who are going to be pro-Roman Catholic, and it really just depends on which part of the country that you're in. Over here in Prague, you go like, oh, well, Prague, they're kind of Bohemian, right? And they're probably going to be Roman Catholic. You'd be correct. But over here, Krakow, that's probably going to be Eastern Orthodox, and you're correct. The people over here tend to look more towards Constantinople. And what's going to end up happening here is that Moravia is going to basically rip itself to pieces. It also doesn't help that they're stuck between a lot of other people that are looking at expanding, like the Poles, who we'll talk about in just a bit, the Hungarians, who were raiding into the territory, the occasional Kievan Rus raid. The Moravians are going to basically fall apart. And by the end of the first decade, by 910, there's really not a really not a Moravia anymore. There's a new state called Bohemia, and the Bohemians are very clear that they're not necessarily going to consider themselves the successor state to the Moravians. They don't necessarily want to be around that, where they're going to be good friends with the Holy Roman Empire, right? No, class clown all you want to. It's great. Do your thing. I appreciate the class clowning. I was the class clown. I think I've shared this before, but I'll share it again because I think it's funny. When I was an undergrad, there's a particular teacher that I really, really appreciated. And he's a really good friend now. He was a brand new teacher when I started taking his classes. So he was only about... I was probably 20. He may have been 26 or 27. He was not... he's only 6 or 7 years older than I am now. But that age range at that time, we were very kind of simpatico. And I started making especially Monty Python references. And I got to the point where I was making Monty Python references in such a timely manner that it would completely derail class. Like I would say something that was just it was just so funny that everybody would just bust out laughing. And he eventually got to the point where he put a limit on me, and I could do one Monty Python reference per class. And so then it like started honing my skill. Then I had to think like really hard, like I only get one. I gotta make sure that I do it the right way. And it was like, it was almost a challenge at that point. And so I started cranking out like really, really good ones then, because I was, waiting for the perfect ones. And then he squeezed the limit. He gave me one per week. And then I was like, it was tough. And I was like, oh man, that's one a week, and if we're in a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, I've got 3 classes and I can only pick one. Like what happens if the thing that he says on Monday right out of the bat is the best thing? Like, do I just burn it right there or do I wait for it? Anyway, it got to the point where I think that he was just sort of trying to game the system with me. And it eventually turned into one a month by the time that I graduated from college. And what's really funny is that I went back to the same college for my master's in history. And the first class that I took was one of his, right? I took a class on Imperial Roman history. And I walked in and I said, hey, this class stretches for 3 months. I got 3 really good ones. And he goes, oh no, you're in grad school now. You get one per term. And that was, it was, you could tell like he had already planned, like he knew that I was going to be in this class because he had invited me to come back, right? Because they had just started the master's program at the college, and he needed good students, and he reached out and said, hey, I knew that you were thinking about getting a master's in history. You should come back and apply. I'm certain that you'll do well in the program. And so he had already planned out that provision. And so I got one per term. And it was really, really tough to sit there. And it got to the point where he knew when I had one, because I would cut my eyes at him and he would just look back at me waiting, like, are you going to burn it? And I would just be like, not this time. And we got almost just as much fun out of me almost doing a Monty Python reference than we did out of me actually doing the Monty Python reference. He's a really, really good friend now. I talk to him not as much as I should, but frequently. Every week or we have communication. It's not every day, but we talk a lot. And he's a great guy. He just got back from a European trip that I was massively jealous of. He went to Venice to do some research and then drove up to Switzerland and over through Austria, down through Slovenia and down into Croatia. Saw a whole bunch of really, really cool stuff that I am uber jealous of. He's a great guy and a really good friend and an incredibly intelligent guy that I've learned a lot from over my life. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but I thought it was funny. All right, so what about our... What, puppy? What do you want? Do you want to come back up here and see me again? Come here. Come on. Come on. Come up. Come and see me. Come on, puppy. Or you want to come over here and do it? You want to come over here? I'm getting like nuzzled in the elbow. Come here. Come here. Oh, yes. There's a puppy again. It's a puppy again. Hello. What are you doing? What are you doing? What? What? I don't know what you want. I do not speak furtive puppy stare. She is a turd. What are you doing? Do you need to go outside? You'll have to go see Brittany if you want to go outside. Go see Brittany. She'll take you outside. Yes, read my mind, human. She'll just stare at you like, don't you understand? And I'm like, no, I don't speak furtive puppy glance. Anyway, that's the puppy. Her name is Kaylee, by the way. And she has more nicknames than a Byzantine emperor. We should probably change this because we're not focusing just on Byzantium anymore. Kaylee the cute turd. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. All right, so what about the Khaganate of the Khazars? Now, we've talked about them several times on stream before. Unfortunately, we have to treat them pretty badly as well because history treated them pretty badly. The Khazars had been very, very powerful for quite some time. But one of the reasons that they had been so successful and powerful in their position was that the power structure within the Abbasid Caliphate benefited them. And when the Abbasid Caliphate collapses and a lot of these other non-Arab or non-specifically non-Abbasid groups start gaining power, this is going to dramatically change the way that the Khazars are going to do their business, specifically when it comes to trade. They had established a whole bunch of trade networks that were pretty powerful and pretty beneficial, but especially when stuff like Armenia, right? Armenia became an independent kingdom and sat right here. The Khazars were sitting right here. And this territory is then going to fracture, and the trade through this area is not going to be particularly as lucrative because the Armenians are going to want to keep more of that. You're dealing now with 5 or 6 different hands that you're passing through instead of just one, right? Now, another problem is that the Kievan Rus over here, especially under guys like Vladimir, are going to start unifying. And that's going to put pressure against the Khazars as well. And as the Kievan Rus begin to expand, they're going to start sucking up, guess what? More of the trade. And one of the things that happens in the 960s is that the Khazars are going to basically try to cut out the Kievan Rus from some of these big trade routes, especially along the Volga River. And the Kievan Rus are not going to have any of it. And this is going to basically be the end of the Khazar Khaganate. Svatoslav of Kyiv is going to invade the Khazar Khaganate, set them in utter disarray, wreck their capital city, destroy basically all of their centers of habitation, and scatter their people to the winds. Now, the Khazars don't disappear. They don't all go away, but there's nothing really holding them together anymore. Because the power of Kiev had grown too strong and had become the new center of authority in the region. They were the sort of the new gatekeepers to Eastern Europe. So the Khazar Khaganate, you were cool, you're still going to be around, but we're not going to talk about you very much anymore. Because at this point, the Khazars pretty much done for, politically speaking. Now, what about this right here? Now, at the beginning, again, this is the map at the year 900. We can see that this is the D of Croatia. So this is Duchy of Croatia. Croatia is on the up and up. And with support from the Pope, the Duke of Croatia is going to get elevated to the king of Croatia. Now, that's an important title change. And it's also important that it wasn't the Byzantines that did this, it was the Pope in Rome. And that's going to be telling. Now, the Croatians are going to pretty quickly have to make some arrangements with the Byzantines, because on one side they have the Bulgars who would be interested in taking all of their territory, and on the other side they have the Magyars, or the Hungarians, who would be very interested in taking all of their territory. So you kind of have to have friends with the Byzantine side, but again, the Croatians are looking west. They're not looking east for their political power, and that's an important thing to remember. Ruthius, I literally called this. We've already talked about Basil, and I even said as soon as we finished talking about Basil, I said Ruthius is going to show up and go, "Oh my gosh, you're talking about Basil?" And then he's going to be sad. So we've already talked about Basil. I know that you're... We didn't talk about all of Basil. We talked about the first 24 years of Basil. We set him up to be the Bulgar Slayer, but we didn't slay all the Bulgars yet. Now we're sort of wrapping up all of the other little kingdoms of Hungary. Yeah, so we're just looking at the year 900 to year 1000 right now. So he's got 25 more years of reign that we'll talk about the next time we get back around this way, which might be, I don't know, a couple of months, 3 months, 4 months. I don't even know how long it's going to be. However long it is. All right. Oh my gosh, am I talking about oregano? No, not this time. All right. The Principality of Hungary. Now, Principality, Prince, bigger than Duke, but Principality of Hungary. Also, hey, Frank, good to see you, my friend. Are you talking about Mrs. Dash seasoning salts? Anyway, here's Hungary. What's going on with Hungary? Hungary is on the way up. And there's a specific reason for this. Now, the Magyars or the Hungarians, I'm using these words interchangeably because they were interchangeable at the time. The Hungarians had always been sort of a loose coalition of different peoples. Now, some of these were Khazars, some of them were Magyars, some of them were, even Turkic peoples that, came from part of the steppe. So when they got to Eastern Europe, they were always kind of a nebulous group that didn't necessarily have a very strong central leadership. But when you put them in a world where all of the other big players are centralized, what ends up happening is this very interesting process where you want to deal with one person. If I'm the Byzantine emperor, I don't want to make a treaty with 14 different Hungarian nobles. I want to make a treaty with one Hungarian leader. That's the leader of all of them. And this is the same thing that can happen with the Croatians or with the Holy Roman Empire or the Kievan Rus. You just want to make a treaty with one person. You don't want to have to track down every single potential head of power. Or we're going to make treaty with one person, and because of our relationship, that one person is going to get disproportionately powerful compared to all of the other leaders. Regardless of the method of the madness, what ends up happening is that disparate groups will either scatter or they will centralize. You don't see many disparate groups that hang around at a continuous level of disparate status. You want to deal with one person. And in Hungary, that had been moving towards a center of power. And by this point, they are going to end up being unified by a king. And we actually know that king's name. That king's name is Stephen. And here he is. Arethius, it will be in the VOD. So as soon as I get done with the stream, I'll publish the VOD, and you'll be able to keep up or catch up with it that way. Yeah, you play tribes against each other. They kill you off. It's Rome stuff. Absolutely. But this is Stephen, who is the first king of Hungary. And again here, what's interesting is that he is going to be backed by the Holy Roman Empire and the Pope. He's not going to be backed by the Byzantines. If you're seeing what's happening here, I'll clarify it a little bit in just a bit. But one more check-in before we go, and that is with our group up here, the Polish. The Lords of the Polons, right? Now, we talked about the move towards unification of Poland in the last stream, but it is at this point that Poland will get completely unified into one kingdom, and this is in the middle to the late 900s, and the first king of a unified Poland at this point is a guy named Mieszko, and he is going to convert to Roman Catholicism, not looking eastward. So that's an important point as well. How much actual power does the Pope have at this point? Lots. And that segues us right into sort of a larger discussion. So that's kind of the political landscape. But if we're looking at things culturally speaking, what's going on culturally in this part of the world? One of the biggest things is that a polar world is growing ever more present. And one of the poles is Constantinople, and the other pole is Rome. And everybody in between is going to have to pick a side. Now, theologically speaking, they're still in the same church, right? At this point, there's no such thing as the Roman Catholic Church or the Eastern Orthodox Church. There is just the Christian church. So if you are a Christian, theoretically, anywhere on earth, you are a part of the same church. There aren't denominations yet. It's very, very close, though. One of the things that happens here is these new countries are converting to Christianity. The Kievan Rus convert to Christianity. The Poles convert to Christianity. The Hungarians convert to Christianity. Who gets to control these people? Now, this is a problem that had gone all the way back to the 1st and 2nd century AD. When a new group of people converted to Christianity, which church did they answer to? Because there were 5 big patriarchs, right? There was Rome, Constantinople, and Jerusalem, and Antioch, and Alexandria in Egypt, right? And you got put in one of these sort of baskets. When these new people are converting, those baskets still exist. Who gets them? And because of the geographic location of these particular peoples, the closest ones are either Constantinople or Rome. So which one gets them? And that's a direct power play, because all of these people are going to be looking for answers of what is right, what is not right, what is Christian, what is not Christian. They're going to need a lot of leadership. They're going to need a lot of ability to sort of play out their game. If you think this should be an HBO series, the stuff that we'll talk about next time we come around, which is called The Great Schism, that should be an HBO miniseries. It involves all sorts of really cool stuff. Everybody in the Christian world gets excommunicated. It's crazy stuff. People get insulted during Mass at church. It's crazy, crazy stuff. We'll talk about that extensively next time we come around, because it's a humongously important point in history. So who gets to who gets to be in charge here? Who's in the prime position of the Christian church? Is it the Pope in Rome, or is it the Patriarch of Constantinople? Who's the big guy? And there are actual theological disputes, and we won't cover those here now because honestly, I know that not everybody gets super excited about talking about nitpicky theological debates, so we won't do that right now. But the church issue is a big issue. It's a big issue. But West Rome is getting hammered by barbarians all the time. No, at this point, all of the barbarians are gone. We are 600 years past the barbarians. They are all kings now. So like this is even we're 60 years past Charlemagne. We're in year 900. The barbarian invasions start. Well, I guess it depends on when you want to start them. If you're talking about like the Cimbri, that's all the way back in like the 1st century. But the big barbarian invasions are like 400-ish. Yeah, so like late 300s, early 400s. Of course, Western Rome falls in 476. Sort of the last of the Roman emperors. Yeah, we're way past. Yeah, so the Roman Empire in the West is gone and has been at this point for 500 years. We've got well. Let me go back to my map here. We can look at what Eastern Europe or Western Europe looks like. So we've got multiple kings of the Franks, right? The kingdom of Italy right here is actually being ruled by Carolingian Frank. The Byzantines control part of this stuff. Some of these little city-states down here are ruled by local Italian lords. We've got the Western king of the Franks. We've got the Eastern king of the Franks. We've got the Emirate. This is Cortuba, but it's Cordoba, right? Kingdom of Asturias, which is really should not actually just say Kingdom of Asturias. This is incorrect. I just noticed this should be King of Leon and a couple of other kingdoms over here. Anyway, the Byzantines are all the way over here, up against what is modern day Armenia. So, and of course up here we've got just chaos in the British Isles, right? So that's what's going on over here. Anyway, another thing, and this gets back to what I covered earlier, so I won't rehash all of it. There's a lot of trade going on. And specifically what I didn't mention is when there are all of these new countries forming, all of these countries have courts, right? They have kings and they have nobles, and all of those people want luxury items. If you're the king of Croatia, you're just the brand new king of Croatia, right? You were formerly a duke, now you're a king. You want big, fancy, cool stuff, right? You want friggin' cool crowns, and you want to be able to invite people over to your palace that's just decked out in finery. But that means you got to get the cool stuff. So with all of these new courts being set up, there's a pinch on trade goods, which means that people start looking for more stuff, which means they have to start going more further afield, and that means trade is going to pick up. But with all of these shifting alliances and shifting political boundaries, who controls the trade cities? And in fact, some of the reasons why these boundaries shift is because you want to control the trade cities. That's where all the money's coming from, right? You want first dibs on the cool stuff. So this is also going to expand naval power. You're going to start seeing more people building navies and having sea trade, especially around the Mediterranean and into the Black Sea and even out around the Atlantic coastline. You're going to start seeing a lot more people moving around on ships because you want to be talking to people as close to possible as the origin of your trade good, because the fewer hands that it has to pass through, the better deal you're going to get on it, right? So there is a big push in trade goods, and everybody wants to acquire the coolest of stuff, right? U.S. has factions like that at the time, but U.S. also has factions. Well, the USA doesn't exist at that time, right? The Americas are under at that point the only what we would consider true polities, which is like a government with rules and laws and a centralized ruler. The only place that those exist during this time period are down in Mesoamerica and in South America. There aren't really kingdoms in North America at all in this particular period of time. It's getting close. The Mississippian period is kicking off, but you're not going to start seeing big kings like that until probably another 100 years or so, at least. Chaos in the British Isles is my new album. I like it. It's like a fancier way of saying anarchy in the UK, right? What's up, David? Good to see you, man. If Basil II didn't have a successful rule, would the empire have died sooner than 1453? Well, I mean, I'll rehash a little bit and say that Basil took over when the Byzantines were already doing really, really well. Nicephorus and John I, prior to Basil, both did spectacular things for the Byzantines and put them on a really, really good spot. Basil, of course, capitalized on that and further pushed it into goodness. But I don't know if we can pin the entire future just on Basil. I mean, he was an important king, and he was very stable at the rudder for 50 years almost. And that's an important concept as well. You know, continuity is a stabilizing force within an empire. But I don't know. That's a question that would be really interesting to try to game out. And I feel like what ends up happening is way too many variables start getting in the mix, and I don't know if we could ever really say. But it's a good question, and I like it. Were the northern groups of people still nomadic, or just hadn't grouped into large enough? Were northern groups? Are we talking about stuff like people in Norway and Sweden and Denmark? Denmark was an organized kingdom at that time. As well, I don't know. Can we say that Norway was a kingdom at that point? Probably yes. Okay, yeah, we can say that. Sweden was not a unified country. At that point, it was just a place called Gotaland. Oh, in North America? There just weren't enough population centers at that point. At the end of the Woodlands period, a lot of the big cities and centers of habitation that had existed thinned back out. There was a move back towards semi-nomadism and away from sedentary living in a lot of the Northern American territories. That's true mostly for the Woodlands region, which is what we basically call the stuff that's east of the Mississippi River. Now, if you get out to the southwest, they're actually going through opposite situations. The stuff in the southwest during the 800s and 900s is moving towards communal living. This is when you get the Pueblo people that build stuff like Mesa Verde or Montezuma's Castle, if you know any of these big Pueblo cliff-dwelling places that are out in places like Arizona, New Mexico, etc. And it's perfectly fine to tangent. Basil II is like Tywin from Game of Thrones, but less charming. Yeah, I'll give you that. Because he's very, very effective and he's super brutal. Yeah, I'll give you that. All right. So we've got trouble growing with the church. We've got trade getting bigger. We've got navies getting bigger. And let's talk about... you somewhat remember some stream where you showed Pueblos. I showed some of those last time we talked about America, which was probably a couple of months ago. You can go back and watch the VOD for that. I think that one might have actually been broken and I need to put it back together. I think during one stream around that time period, my internet cut out and I've got to edit the videos back together and post the VOD. Thanks for reminding me of that. I need to do that. I need to put my dog's rabies tag on before I go to bed tonight too. I'm just trying to say these things out loud so that I remember. What we have entered though in Eastern European concepts is by this time a fully medieval world. So when you think of medieval, we've got that. We've got castles. We've got court systems where nobility is a really, really big thing. And the hierarchy of nobility is becoming infinitely more important. We know the difference between a duke and a prince and a king and an emperor. All of these titles become basically the center of politics. We have a whole lot of emphasis on stuff like humanism. So if you know about the medieval world in Western Europe, you've probably heard of humanism. They had that in Eastern Europe kind of first. And especially with people like this guy. And I get to put on the adventure hat one more time. Whee! Gotta love it. Adventure. Like this guy. This is Constantine the Seventh. The human fun, right? I got a lot of problems with you people. Let me catch up. You lost your first film camera when you were like 9 or 10 at a Pueblo cave city, alas. Oh, that's great. That is a great story. You should tell that as a Flint story. That would be a pretty epic Flint story. I know it doesn't happen in Flint, but it was when you were living in Flint. That's a great one. You're always happy to indirectly remind people of their worldly tasks known as chores. Thanks, Tad. Hope you're having a good one, man. Anyway, Constantine the Seventh. This guy is a pretty big deal because he is sort of what you might think of as the good medieval king. He was a humanist. He was a patron of the arts. He was a writer. He encouraged the collection of knowledge. And one of the things that happened during his reign was the beginning of basically an encyclopedia, which is something that didn't happen in Western Europe for another couple centuries. You found all of these scholars that were going around making these giant topical codices where they would try to find everything that had ever been written about this one topic. Like, let's get all of the stuff about medicine and bind it together and make copies of it, and this will be the medical codex, right? They did the same things with stuff like economics. They did the same thing with stuff like philosophy and stuff like government. And Constantine himself is actually going to write manuals on how to run a country really well. And this is a pretty big movement. The humanist movement. So let me explain what humanism is. Basically, humanism is this idea that you can make the world better by making the things that humans do better. You focus on all of the stuff that encompasses human existence, and you try to just make it better. So, art. Humans like art. Let's try to do art better. Architecture. Humans like living in houses and going to see nice buildings. We should make buildings better. Humans like living in governments that are equitable and don't treat them like crap. We should do governing better. There is a big push in poetry during this time. Byzantine poetry sort of blows up around this era. You get all of this emphasis on just sort of making the world a better place. And this is going to have a direct impact on Western Europe a little bit later, because when the Western Europeans start catching on to this concept of, oh, you all have cool stuff, one of the things that they're going to figure out is we go to the Byzantine world, we find all of these big texts that they put together, and they go, hey, what is that? And the Byzantines go, oh, that's like every military manual that we ever had, and we sewed it together and made a codex out of it, and we made copies of it. And the Western Europeans are like, dude, can we have one of those? And they're like, yeah, we'll make you a copy. And this is basically what starts the Western European Renaissance, because the humanist movement in the medieval world over in Eastern Europe had already been going at that point for a couple hundred years. And this is when it's going to kick off. So you get this new interest and new focus on doing good stuff and just trying to make the world a better place. You love governments that do good things for people. Where are they? It's a fair question. I don't know. I would like to think that governments do keep me from getting murdered most of the time. And I do like that, because I feel like sometimes I'm rather murderable. I tick people off sometimes, and I don't know if murder was legal. I don't know if I'd still be around, right? Also, like not getting. I'm pretty sure that's on everybody's list. What do you want to do today? I would like to survive. That'd be great. All right, so let's look at a map right here at the end, and we'll sort of wrap up what we got. We've got our Roman Empire. We've got the Bulgarian Empire that's lessened and smaller. We've got our Kingdom of Hungary, our Kingdom of Croatia. We've got a kingdom up here in Poland. The remnants of Moravia are now going by Bohemia. And of course, the Kievan Rus are just blowing up over here and taking up all of this space at the expense of the Khazar Khanate. I take issue with this particular map that says that in the year 1000 there was still a Khazar Khanate. There were still people that were calling themselves Khans, and they might have had limited power, but there was not a centralized government over here that looked anything like the Khazar Khanate that was around in the year 1000, or in the year 900 rather. It just wasn't a thing. But I could nitpick on that, and basically there would be maybe 5 or 10 people that would give a crap about arguing with me about it, right? But that is our rundown of what's going on in Eastern Europe during the 10th century. And I hope that this sort of put some stuff in perspective, maybe put some roots back and tied some stuff together. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. If anybody would like to redeem any sort of channel points, now's a pretty good time to do so. Otherwise, we might do ourselves a bit of a raid. But we'll see what's going on. We'll let everybody have an opportunity to put in questions if you'd like to. So, what you got? Standard question book. Ooh, it has been a minute since we've done standard question book. Also, what up, Noger? All right, so this is the standard question book. I know that we've got a lot of new people in the room, so briefly, let me explain what this is. This is an antique book. It's 103 years old now. In 1920, you could order a college story, a course, and you'd get all the books. This is your study guide. I don't have the textbooks that go along with it, so I just have a book full of questions. And what we do is we find a random page, like, I don't know, this one. And we open it up, and then I just move my finger down to right here, and then we read this question. And if I know the answer to it, I'll answer it, and if I don't know the answer to it, we'll go look it up. When was Panama settled? What does the name Panama mean? And by whom was the city of Panama founded? These are great questions, and I don't know. So we're going to have to go and do ourselves some Wikipediaing. No, let me... Nope. Yep, there we go. Panama. All right. Let's go to history, pre-Columbian period. Conquest. Rodrigo de Bastidas sailed westward from Venezuela in 1501 in search of gold and became the first European to explore the Isthmus of Panama. Interesting. So, who discovered Panama is Rodrigo de Bastidas. Oh, we've got even a little picture of him. Yeah, check this guy out. Okay. What was the second question? Actually, the first question was, when was Panama settled? In 1513, it was a new passage. Pedro Arias Davila as royal governor. He arrived in 1514. Okay, so 1514 is when it was settled. What does the name Panama mean? All right, I think there was an etymology section. The origin of the name Panama is unknown. There are several theories. One states that the country was named after a commonly found species of tree. Interesting. Another says that the first settlers arrived in Panama in August when butterflies are abundant, and the name means many butterflies in the indigenous Amerindian languages. Another theory states that the word is a Castilianization, so Castellano, again, Ferdinand and Isabella, kings of Castile, of the Cuna language word banana, which means distant or far away. A commonly relayed legend in Panama is that there was once a fishing village that bore the name Panama, which purportedly meant an abundance of fish. Interesting. So, according to the Wikipedia, we don't know what Panama means, but I'm guessing that in the original textbook, they would have given a specific reference. Everybody can check page 833 for that. By whom was the city of Panama founded? Let's go back down here to... founded... the same guy, Pedro Arias Davila. Oh, Davila. Apologies. Who is not pictured. There we go. Interesting stuff. Give it away now. It's the same song, right? It's just not. There we go. Nice legs, right? He skipped leg day. But that is the standard question book. Interesting stuff. Sometimes I know it. Sometimes we have to go look it up. Either way, it's a good time, right? All right. Anybody else got anything else? Otherwise, we might head on out on a raid. Pedro Arias Davila. All right. I've got to put this away, and I've got to get this hat. The opinion hat. Yeah, I don't even know what that means. Are you asking, can we appreciate things from a long time ago, even if it's not politically correct now? I think that's the question that you're after. Yeah, you can. Sure, why not? If we started eliminating everything from everybody that had ever done anything creepy, we would have nothing left. Because here's the thing about it. Humans are turds, and we're idiots. And every human has done something stupid and questionable, and many people have done things that are truly awful and horrible. And can you enjoy that? Yeah, why not? Don't listen to any classical music, because let me tell you, every classical musician was a horrible, horrible person. Like Beethoven, horrible person. Horrible person. The foundations of Western society, right? Can we read the Declaration of Independence and appreciate that, knowing that 90% of the people that signed the Declaration of Independence owned slaves? Yeah, we can still find appreciation in the fact that they wrote what they did. Does that mean it was good? No. Do we have to remember the context that what it was in? Absolutely. But can I still really like the wording? Yeah, why not? I quote it all the time. What about movies and books and songs? Yeah, sure, why not? John Wayne was a massive racist, but does that mean I can't watch a John Wayne movie and appreciate it? No. I could watch a John Wayne movie and love it if I want to. I don't like John Wayne, and I don't support his particular views on people, but the movie isn't him. There's a difference between the movie and John Wayne. There's a difference between, music by Michael Jackson and Michael Jackson. I don't have to qualify myself by wearing a little pin with an asterisk every time I want to listen to Billie Jean, right? I still like the Thriller album. It's a good album, right? If you're asking me to give you an okay to still like stuff, you can still like stuff. You get to beat yourself up as much as you want to. But, I mean, like somebody mentioned Fawlty Towers earlier, right? Fawlty Towers is a show that has a crap ton of racism and misogyny and classism, and it's like if it would never get made today. And do I tell people, oh, you've totally got to go watch Fawlty Towers? No, I don't go tell everybody that. But if I want to watch an episode of Fawlty Towers, do I still laugh at it? Yeah, why not? I'm not, like, I'm never going to treat my wife the way that Basil Fawlty treats his wife. I'm never going to talk to people of color the same way that he talks to his bellhop. And I'm an adult that can distinguish between fiction for the sake of entertainment and reality. And I don't feel the need to disassociate myself from things of fictitious work because the person who created the fictitious work, or even the fictitious work itself, has things that today are, and even back then were, like, the truth of misogyny didn't appear today, right? Misogyny has always been misogyny. We've just become more aware of the fact that you can't get away with that crap in our today's society, and that's a very positive thing, right? Talking to women like that wasn't cool even back then. It was just culturally acceptable. That doesn't mean that I'm going to show this to an impressionable 10-year-old and go, here's how you talk to women. Listen to Fawlty Towers. No. But, from a substitute, teaching a lot of history was taken out of high school context. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I like H.P. Lovecraft. And his work has racist stuff in it. One of his stories is all about people being shunned because they literally married into a family of apes from Africa. Like, it's weird stuff. But does that mean that the way that he crafted the story is bad? Does that mean that I have to read that and feel bad about liking it? No. If somebody asks me, hey, did you like that H.P. Lovecraft story? I can answer, yeah, I really like it, but it's got all this crap in it that you probably should be aware of, right? Also, H.P. Lovecraft, super giant racist. He was a really horrible person. Does that mean I'm not going to talk about Cthulhu ever again? No. You like Breakfast at Tiffany's, right? Mickey Rooney, obviously racist. Obviously. No question about it. Was racist back then. The joke back then was that it was racist. But does that mean that I can't watch Breakfast at Tiffany's and enjoy it today? No. I just have to be aware that what I'm looking at is, based on a time where that was acceptable. It's not now. I can't use this as a reference for how I act or how I think. And I just sort of understand that this is an encapsulated bubble of time, right? A movie is an hour and a half long or 2 hours long, and it was made in the 60s. So this is a little 2-hour bubble of the 1960s. And we can even learn stuff from that, right? Like, holy crap, that was around back then and that was okay. We don't do that anymore. Yeah, and that's a teachable moment. Why don't we do that anymore? Why? And I'm not trying to say that I'm going to go show my students in sociology Breakfast at Tiffany's and go, look, this is the way that we should act. No, what's going to happen is I might go, okay, here's a still image of Mickey Rooney playing an Asian guy. This is obviously not okay. Today we would call this cultural appropriation. Let's talk about why it was okay back then and what's changed between then and now. And this is a teachable moment that we do all the time. It's called comparative historical research, where we look at 2 points in time and compare them and see what's changed and then ask the questions why and how. Perfectly valid, right? And I'm never going to go tell anybody, you should go watch Breakfast at Tiffany's for to learn how to talk like an Asian person, right? It's okay, right? If you're asking me to give everybody a pass, be an adult and take the pass, right? Right? I'll just delete it if I can. Right? So that's my opinion about that. And I know that is not what a lot of people would like for an opinion to be in today's world, but the opinion hat is the opinion hat. And that's my opinion. So if that gets me cancelable, then okay. I don't think that anything that I said was arguable, but it's an opinion. You don't have to believe it. You could say, oh, that Shane's full of crap, and then go on about your day. You watch the G.I. Joe cartoon from the 80s, the racist stereotypes were awful? Exactly. Does that mean you can't watch G.I. Joe and have nostalgia about it? No. I mean, there's racist stereotypes in friggin' Thundercats, right? Yeah, I'm canceled for lots of other things, right? Plenty of other things, but not this one. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Johnny Quest, like the whole existence of Haji in Johnny Quest, super crazy racist. I never actually liked Johnny Quest that much, not because of the racist stuff. I was not aware of the racism when I was 10. It just wasn't my bag. I'd rather have something with, like He-Man or something like that. So that's my opinion on that. And again, my opinion. You can take it, you can leave it, whatever you want. That's what it is. So, but I did talk a lot, and I'm not used to talking a lot anymore because I'm on summer break, and my throat is getting a bit much, and I've streamed now 3 days in a row, so it's like I've taught 3 days in a row, and my voice is catching up with me. So, I think it's time for us to go ahead and do a raid. We're going to go raid Artist of the Chonky Horse, Allie Briggs. And if you have the Chonky Horse emote, we will use that instead of the adventure hat in our raid call. And if you would like to unlock the Chonky Horse, if you have the points, remember that you can unlock one emote if you just want to use it for the raid call. You can do that. I think it's like 480 points or something like that. But we're about to go raid Allie. Our battle cry, as always, is adventure with, adventure. And then throw your galloping Chonky Horses. Allie, by the way, drew and animated the Chonky Horse. So that is why we will use it instead of the adventure hat. I will not be around this weekend. I have a very full schedule, so I'm not even going to try to pretend like I'm going to do any Gundam work this week. That's why I streamed yesterday doing Gundam stuff. But I will be back next week, and I hope everybody has a good weekend. And until next time, take it easy. See you around.